What's that? Country song.
It's like roll
And we're
with
live. Is that a country song? Roll with it?
I think so, but I'm not a country music aficionado.
Well, let's roll with the Not a Show.
Not a show.
This is not a show. It might not even be a connection. Here's Judah and Guest.
And it's Judah and Guest, of course, with me tonight. It's a Wednesday, and the creek didn't rise.
Again.
So, again, how fortuitous. I'm here
We're very
with
blessed.
my good friend. Blessed to be here with my friend Joshua. We're late tonight. We're probably going to be late from now on because I've started to work doing some youth ministry at my church. And we don't get done till 8. So we're gonna be running a little late. Maybe we could talk about doing a different day, but I don't know.
Maybe,
if you're cool
yeah,
with doing late, I'm cool with doing late.
we can roll with it.
We can country song roll with it.
Roll
Well,
or something.
Tonight I want it has to do with something. Kids can be such amazing little theologians. I said at one point, I said, why? Oh, I always check in on the first day with your worst injury. And I said, why would I check in with worst injury at church? And one of the kids said, because God made us able to feel pain. And I was like, whoa, what? Yeah, he did. He made us able to feel pain. And then somebody said, well, were we able to feel pain before there was sin? And I was like, that's a really good question. And so I wanted to talk about connection tonight because the reason I always have, especially children, but any group, check in with their worst injury is because vulnerable comes from the Latin wound. And in order to be vulnerable with each other, I feel like we have to open ourselves up to be wounded or talk about woundedness. You know, we have to be able to talk about woundedness to be vulnerable with each other, and I think the more we talk about our wounds, the more connected we are. What do you think?
I would agree with that statement. I think there is some opportunity to connect in an intimate way with other people in a non-vulnerable way. However,
are you talking about theoretically or like you've seen it happen?
I mean, so like we're doing it right now. Like even as we're speaking, we're connecting maybe in a non-vulnerable way. Because like we're talking about vulnerabilities sort of in the abstract, right?
Yeah.
But yet there is a connection, or since this is not a show, it might not be a connection.
Well, wouldn't you say though? And that's why I say it might not even be a connection.
But vulnerability is it is a place that it is a way. I shouldn't say it's a place. It's a way that we connect with one another on a much deeper level, because we all have experienced pain. We've all experienced some amount of suffering, wounding. And even though the circumstances or the specifics of our wounding might be different, that experience of pain, that experience of loss, that experience of suffering is universal for human beings. And it's oddly
it's human, right?
It's human, and I think it's a very gentle place. It's a gentle way of connecting, because it we can try to connect on the level of a rational discourse of truth.
Yeah.
Please comment. Please comment. And I see this a lot, like working with couples. Like you can spend a lot of time getting stuck in the content of a conversation about what happened and how it was said and what was meant.
Yeah.
And then if you push into that conversation a little bit deeper, to a much more vulnerable place, people find themselves rather connected frequently, and they connect in a way that has room for love. It's rare when people are swinging around their own version of the truth that they connect in love.
Yeah.
But when we can admit wrongs, when we can forgive, when we can open up about fears and anxieties and longings and desires, then we realize, wow, we're actually kind of on the same page here.
So yeah, and I had this conversation. Do you? Yeah, I don't know if you remember David Tackett. I had a conversation. I don't remember if it was David Tackett or Joseph Rhodes, but somebody. I had this conversation about Superman and how we had both of us realized that neither of us really liked Superman because he was invulnerable, because he was too perfect, and the thought came to my mind today, along those lines, is like connecting with God. Is that sometimes it's hard for me to talk about God as perfect because that it feels alien. Perfect feels alien.
Well, absolutely.
And hard to connect with.
I'll stick with alien. I think that's a great word,
Yeah.
because the perfection of God is so radically other, so radically different. And I think the difficult thing, like when we look at Superman is not a man. Superman is an alien.
He is an alien.
I mean, he really is.
Yeah.
But when you come face to face with Jesus, here is a man who suffers. Here is a man who cries. Here's a man who displays a whole variety of emotions. So, I mean, the opportunities to connect there as a human are immense. But flipping back to this radical otherness of the nature of God. Yeah, I want to. There's a part of me, I dig that and affirm it. And yes, I agree. It can be difficult to approach. Which is, I think, the whole point of the incarnation. But that's just me.
Well, I think yes. While you're talking, what comes to my mind is it's not so much perfection that is hard to connect with. It would be because that's not even a thing you can connect with anyways. It's not a relation. Perfection isn't a relational aspect of somebody, but weakness or a lack of weakness, and because of Christ, God does not lack weakness. Because of Christ, God has weakness. Humans are ultimately weak.
Well, we are, yes, and there's a sense in which I don't want to say that Christ. I don't know. There's a part of me that's like, no, it's not a. I don't. And I guess the hard
vulnerability
thing is making this distinction between vulnerability and weakness. That's the thing. Like, weakness is like it's our fault and we can't help it. As opposed to I took on purposefully pain, and so I mean there's this, we can say that it's weakness, but if we take a step back, it's like, well, yeah, but it's a little more complicated than that.
Well, and there is this thing about vulnerability that is that it is opening yourself up to weakness, but it's almost like the moment you embrace vulnerability, the weakness disappears, right? It's like the weakness is in that uncertainty right before you embrace it, right?
Maybe. I mean, if we think of vulnerability as the ability to be wounded, right, or the ability to experience pain, to experience loss, it, depending upon how we're looking at it, yeah, it becomes immediately a strength, because there are things that are gained through being able to have that experience.
Like facing it head on, right? Like running away, it's like you do become weak. It's because you don't know where it's
Oh,
coming
sure.
from, right?
Well, yeah, you become
Facing
limited.
something
You
head
become
on.
limited.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just, I don't like that word weak when I think of Jesus, but and I'll have to sit on that with it for a moment.
But he was weak in some aspect, right? Like he
purposefully limited.
Well, I mean, in the very scientific or the very basic use of it, he was unable to hold himself up at some point, right?
Oh, sure. In that sense, yes, absolutely.
Weak,
Yeah,
you know. Yeah.
No, there's.
Did he have weakness?
I guess my struggle is, I don't think he had weakness in the way I have weakness.
Right. Well,
in the specific way that.
Then was he tempted in the way you are tempted?
Yes.
Not if he doesn't have weakness in the way you have weakness.
Well, I think the weakness would be, and he did not succumb to said temptations.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that like having weakness is not bad.
No, not or immoral, right?
Right, or immoral. Yeah.
Or necessarily culpable.
Like the fact that he was hungry when Satan tempted him.
Yeah,
that was weakness. It was weakness that he was hungry.
A form of weak. Yeah, no, I hear you.
And yet,
to use that word in that way.
Yeah. And I think that's why. I think that's why it's important, like our connection with Him, a human connection with God through Christ and the incarnation. It's interesting to me that, like, I consider connection spirituality, like there, and yet it's important. It's impossible to connect with somebody without a physical, carnal experience.
Tell me more.
Well, I'm trying to figure it out. There is a connection with somebody when you have chemistry. When I have chemistry with someone, it's a spiritual thing. It's
that registers in your body, right? I mean, or is
it registers in my body, my brain, my emotions? You know, it's not something. It registers with me spiritually in a way that I can't account for it. Physically, we're not talking about attraction here. We're not talking about, it's just, there's a connection with some people that, like our connection now, there's nothing I can say that it's like, and yet it's everything. It's not one particular thing. And yet everything is going on. And to me, that's what spirituality is. We think of it as this like wind or whisper, but really it's not the lack of physical, emotional, and intellectual. It's actually the syncretization of them, right?
All of it.
Yeah. Which is kind of interesting. I don't think I've ever thought about that before. because I always think of spiritual as metaphysical, so not physical and not intellectual,
or above, greater than
or
that,
above,
above.
yeah, above,
Um,
yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it's. I don't know. I guess as a human being, I don't divorce my body from those experiences. So, and we come from an intellectual tradition, at least since the last 500 years, that has tended to be hyper rational.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think a biblical spirituality is, um, dare I even use the word holistic, right? Like that it encompasses our physiology, our emotions, our thoughts. It encompasses all of those things. Um,
Hmm.
all of those parts of ourselves.
I have thought a lot about metaphysics and the soul, and I don't think I've ever categorized the spirit or spirituality in a way that it's interdimensional as far as our dimension of physical, spiritual, and intellectual. I've always, well, I guess I've always just, it's just in the spiritual realm,
It's
but
it's in the ether. It's in the
yeah,
platonic world of ideas.
yeah. But
Um,
that's the world of ideas. That's not spiritual. That's not, because the spirit is
ideas
felt.
are very spiritual, right? There is nothing somatic about a platonic view of ideas. They have no embodiment.
Yeah.
Um, the thing I think I can't. Well, one, I think if we read the New Testament from an Old Testament perspective, then and then if you look at the whole of the body of Scripture as one book, then it is very bottom up in a
Mm,
sense. I think of this of the Psalms in particular. I mean, they're just straight from the gut.
mm.
They're very emotional,
Yeah.
and you can't talk about emotion without registering some sensation, some connection between like a reciprocity of the experience that's being described and then like what you register as being your experience inside of your body when you have that emotion. Like when you experience guilt, when you experience joy, when there's exaltation. I mean, there's just, these are
Yeah.
things that ultimately are expressed in your body and in your behavior. And
Well, they're ultimately experienced, right? I don't think we
right.
can have experience outside of our body.
Well, I keep that as an open door, based on um, other people's experiences as described in scripture.
Well, I guess what I
But
mean,
I have never had that experience.
well, I guess what I mean is outside of the language of our
Sure.
body.
Yes. And I think that's why
Outside of having already experienced, if somebody hadn't
oh
experienced
yeah.
the, I just obviously I can't imagine experience outside of the body
Well,
because,
yeah.
like you say, I've
Well,
never had one.
and you see it in scripture both, in apocalyptic language, which is highly symbolic,
Yeah.
and even, Paul's description of the third heaven, which basically just says, "Yeah, I'm going to stop talking." I knew a guy once, and he experienced things that really can't be put into words. There's my rough paraphrase of that.
Yeah. I knew a guy and he experienced some things that,
I knew a guy once, and just saying. Um, but yeah, outside of that, yeah, I think it's all within the fearfully and
well, then,
wonderfully created thing that we are, a
well, and
psychosomatic whole.
yeah. Well, then the question to me of, different kinds of bodies, just because this body is what I know.
Sure.
I mean, obviously we have read about bodies they call bodies, but are different bodies. So Jesus' body after the transfiguration, um, bodies of angels. They appear in some corporeal form.
yeah, sure. Yeah, they manifest themselves in some corporeal
Mhm.
way. The transfiguration, I think, is a little tricksy because there are differing, whether or not like he had a different body or simply the eyes of the apostles are open to who he really was.
Well, he went through a wall or door.
Well, post resurrection, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so versus like when you say transfiguration, I'm thinking of like he takes Peter,
Oh, on the
James, and
mountain.
Paul
Yeah.
on the mountain.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he's shown as white as snow,
Right.
light.
Yeah. Yeah. His robe. The light made it white.
Light, piercing light. Um, yeah, and whatever body we'll have, and I think it was at First Corinthians 15 that kind of molds that one over a little bit. That it's not going to be like it's like this body, but not like this body. That's good enough for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important to discuss this stuff as we, especially for you and I who work in the realm of communication, connection. It's important for me, at least, to think about what's going on. And I do appreciate in this program I was in, Becoming a Man, BAM, there was an emphasis on men sharing what their body felt like, what their emotions felt like, what they were thinking about, and what they felt like spiritually. And they expressed that in connection. They weren't particularly religious, but they saw the need for that part of humans, the spiritual, and they expressed it in terms of connection. And I had never thought of it that way before, but when I was forced to explain it, to my groups and stuff, I realized, wow, there is something very spiritual about connection that is beyond a handshake, a kiss. It's something else, right? It's a connection that is not physically transmitted, but spiritually transmitted. Although we receive it physically, right? We receive it with our eyeballs.
Well, yeah. Well,
Their ears and
I don't know. I guess I take a slightly modified view
okay.
About connection and I guess it just depends on how you're using the word spiritual.
Yeah.
I know, like spiritual as opposed to something that's purely somatic. Yeah, like you said, like a handshake. But the reality is, like, especially if you're in a room with people, our nervous systems don't really stop at at where our skin stops. The reality is that people influence each other's nervous systems when they're in proximity. And we can be attuned to one another. We can resonate with one another, on a deeply physical level, even without touching, if that makes sense.
I hear you. I mean, there's smell, there's sight. As you say, it's interesting to think of our nervous system extending out beyond our body, but it really does because of our imagination, right?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily in the world of ideas. I mean, the reality is our nervous system is at some point on a molecular level, we're talking about electricity. And there's a lot going on, but there's a lot going on that our our minds, our bodies, our souls make sense of, interpret, and experience what's going on around us. I mean, I tell my kids all the time, as far as like situational awareness, like very
Yeah.
subtly, I let them know, like, especially as young women, like, it's okay if you walk into a room and you get the feeling that this is not a good place to be. When your body tells you it's not a good place to be, you need to listen to your body and leave. And
It's
you don't need,
okay to listen to your body. Yeah.
it's okay to listen to your body, because your body is picking up on so much more than your prefrontal, like just this part of your brain, this part right here behind your forehead. It's picking up a whole lot more, and it's processing it a lot faster. But it registers it's throughout the rest of your body. It's not just your prefrontal cortex. It's not just discursive, rational thought.
Do you leave open the possibility of people being able to hone that and manipulate that, and to be able to communicate more specifically through that electricity?
Not necessarily, and maybe, but at least scientifically, as I understand it, a lot of what our bodies have been really fine tuned to monitor is safety.
Safety.
Is this person safe? Is this place safe? Is this situation safe? And we can get into situations where we have, through various means, taught ourselves to disregard the wisdom of the body, and it often gets folks in a jam. So do I think we can fine tune like how we read the sensors? Absolutely. But to use it for communication purposes, I still think that like verbal communication is, bar none, what separates us not only from all of other creatures, but it creates just a world of potential possibilities. And there's also a dark side to the use of language, because miscommunication is very easy, as well as deception.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's unintended. Like I meant to get the message across to you, and it didn't work. Versus, I intentionally gave you a false message. So there's some
deception.
There's some challenges with language.
Absolutely. How interesting, though, that that non-prefrontal cortex experience, connection, what have you, is oriented towards safety, and
connection. I should throw that in there, which serves the purpose for connection.
Well, I just think that's interesting. Talking about vulnerability, how important it is to feel safe to connect with people.
It's a precondition. And it doesn't take much.
Whoa. And it doesn't take, what do you mean? Say more.
So, it's the thing being like in the therapy world, right? So people walk in, and within a very short period of time, based on their perceptions of your competency, so their level of trust in you just simply by the situation, right? So people come in with, well, he's a therapist. Okay, what does that mean? But it means a lot to the person coming in, right?
Yeah.
And then
established ideas of expectation, right? Like established expectations.
Yeah. Well, the role, the semblance of the role. Well, the role itself creates its own level of safety.
Yeah.
To some degree, some people are more invested in that than others. I remember this one client who came in, and this is when I was in my practicum. So I was a student, and that person knew I was a student.
Yeah.
And their expectation was when they came in for this initial session, that I would just kind of like be sitting there with a book and working from a book or something. I wish I could remember how they explained it, but
Mm.
their expectation versus what they experienced were entirely different. But
Mm.
so I mean, there's this aspect of role that so when people come in, they bring their own level of trust already with them, and
Yeah.
then do yeah, but in a very short period of time, just by simply listening to somebody through your tone of voice, by just simply demonstrating that you care, people open up, and
Yeah.
they'll open up about things they've probably never told anybody else in a very short period of time. But see, I've had that experience outside of therapy rooms. Like I'm this
Yeah.
random kind of person that, you'll start talking with somebody and then they'll start dropping some stuff that is pretty deeply intimate. And you're like, okay, this is happening again.
Hmm.
So, and that happens. So yeah, I think it doesn't take much.
No, I think some of it has to do with just being able to feel heard. I think
Oh, yeah.
people feeling heard, it creates trust, right?
It does. Well, I mean, but if you listen, what you demonstrate is that you care. I'm
Mm.
not here to push my agenda. I'm just simply here to
Mhm.
care. I'm listening to you, and now you feel cared for. When you feel cared for, you're like, oh, I'm feeling pretty safe. I might take
Mhm.
a risk. I
Yeah.
might reveal some vulnerability here.
Because of the unconscious recognition that there's an incongruity between care and harm, right? I mean,
Right.
but they're opposite.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah. They're
this
polar
person will not
opposites.
harm me
Yeah.
because they are caring for me.
Yeah.
Although that's not, I mean,
No,
that seems like polar
now,
opposites, but they're not, right?
they're not. And the hard thing here is there are exceptions to the rule. Um, People that have been radically and deeply traumatized, especially by former caregivers,
Mm.
that won't happen when you meet these people initially. Then
Right.
you will earn that trust.
Right. You
You
have
will earn
to
it.
earn.
You
And
earn it.
and not through not necessarily through time, but through active, like I think that's why when I feel that somebody is pushing my buttons, I realize, part of this may be a test. They want to know how I'm going to react,
And are you going
especially
to stick
kids,
it
and it may be
out with me? Yeah,
subconscious.
yeah,
Yeah.
um, yeah. It's probably not intentional, and I think yeah. Sometimes people need to press against boundaries and ensure that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. I think there's also sometimes a demonstration of competency
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, yeah.
that that builds trust. Um, and it depends. Yeah, I mean, in general, it doesn't take a lot of caring um, to create safety. There are exceptions to that rule in relationships with other human beings. So, and the hard thing there, I think, is when people encounter those exceptions, um, it, it it can be really, we can judge other people like they're broken,
Mm.
or we can find some fault with ourselves, like, well, what's wrong with me that this person doesn't trust me, as opposed to taking a step back and going, there's probably a good reason for this person's behavior, and it's probably all things considered um, connected to an attempt to achieve some semblance of safety or perceived safety.
Well, there's an interesting saying. What do you call it? Something that you say over and over again. it's just a ready quote, and a ready thing that people have ready in this group of guys I used to be in. My brothers in the BAM program, they would say, your projections are your own. I don't accept your projections. Your projections are your own,
Sure.
in a nice way, you know. Like
Yeah.
I understand that you feel that way about me, and your projections are your own. I may or may not be what you are experiencing. You know, I have to take a look at that,
Mm-hmm.
and those are your projections. You own them. You know, what you see is what you see. I can't see for you.
Yeah. Yeah. In a true sense, to project something, to put it out there and lay it on top of somebody else.
Yeah. I thought that
No.
was cool. Like one time somebody said that, and at first I got offended. I'm like, my projections are my own.
What do you mean by projections? I'm going to show you a projection. You come over here. I'm going to project my.
But it's true. I started saying it to
true.
myself, at least, you know, to when people come at me, like, I think, well, their projections are their own. You know?
They are. We all have them.
Because, well, I often find myself feeling bad for the way somebody perceived me, even if I know that is not the way I am. Like, I feel bad that I came across that way, and it's like, well, I can't control that. I can't control how they see me. You know?
No, because it's all filtered through a whole history that you have no responsibility for.
Yeah, and I can still. I don't think it's healthy to feel bad about it, but it is good to be aware.
You can examine it, but you don't necessarily have to own it.
Right.
Yeah. Depending upon the circumstance, you know. Anymore, I told somebody here recently. I said, I'm too old to care about some of those things. Where I'll just agree with you because you're probably right in some way. Where if you're like, Joshua, you're rude, and I'm like, you know, sometimes I am, and I'm probably am in some way right now. And anything else that you'd like to tell me about me? And I'll work on not being rude in the future, to be more gentle and kind and caring, truthful, courageous.
I think there is an aspect, though, especially of caregivers like us, where we want, where I feel as if caring for somebody means that I tend to the way, you know, I tend to their view of me. And I think you're right. As I get older, I like that. I'm too old to care about that. Too tired.
Because I mean, it's like I can own it. Like most things. I suppose there's a couple that come up, maybe, but most things I can own pretty quickly, because I recognize that to some degree there is some truth to anything that somebody can level at me. I'm like, there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. And now what? Now that we've gotten over that, right? Now that I've taken that in, now what can I do for you? How can I help you? What do you need from me?
Yeah.
As opposed to arguing about whether or not I'm a jerk. Yeah. Sometimes I'm a jerk. I catch myself.
Yeah, it's amazing. Being married, you know, you're talking about vulnerability and connection. It's amazing the things. Well, first of all, it's amazing the things that can get automated, right, in a marriage, to where we've automated it to the point where we don't have to deal with that stuff. And maybe, for survival's sake, that's important, right? Because if we had to deal with every little projection, every little every little difference, every little thing that came up, like, we'd be exhausted. We wouldn't be able to raise kids for sure. And all their little projections and all their little crises, Now, obviously it's important. Those things are important, and so that there is that aspect. It's amazing to see how automated they are. It's also scary, and realizing lately, like, wow, these patterns have gotten way too robotic, to a point where I don't. Does this ever happen to you? Like with my wife, I wonder. Wow, we have built these systems to where there's some places I wonder, can we open ourselves up to woundedness, at this point? Do we have what it takes? Do we have the bandwidth,
Sure. No, those are well, even posing that question to your wife is an act of vulnerability. Right?
Well, I haven't done
it. You're posing this question out loud where you're like,
yeah,
I just wonder if
yeah,
we pressed in a little bit deeper, we went, kind of a C.S. Lewis, further up, further in, kind of idea. What would it take? Do we have that amount of bandwidth? Like, can we open ourselves up to that level of accessibility and engagement with one another? But even asking that question is a vulnerable question, because
the answer demands like some
what I would say that what's really underneath that, and because if you pose the question, and if the response is, well, why are you asking this question? If you're really clear about where you are emotionally, then at least my go-to there is, I'm afraid I don't have it.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I don't have it. It's easy to project on somebody else and say, well, I'm afraid you don't have it. Right. Now that is a projection. I'm afraid you don't. Right. I'm afraid that you're just not going to be able to go there with me.
Right.
Like, you don't have the ability to go there with me, or you're not willing to go there with me. There's a very few options there. It's either ability or willingness.
Well, and that's what keeps me in. That's what keeps me in that. Is it is that, like, crutch of, well, I don't know. I say we, but really you're right. It's like, I don't know if she can handle it. But the truth is, I don't know if I can handle it.
Yeah, but that's the vulnerable statement. I'm afraid that, and whatever follows after that is important. But I think it's when that becomes the place where we start, that's a place where people can most of the time immediately connect. Right? Like, there are some instances where it may not occur, but most of the time people can resonate with, oh yeah, because I've got that feeling too, I just never said it. Because those are pretty universal experiences on some level, on some spectrum. I think we all harbor those fears, just even when they're minuscule, like even when they're manageable. There's still, if we really sit down long enough and go, every once in a while that nagging fear comes up. And then sometimes when people are in distress, or there's some nagging doubts or different things like that, that fear is much bigger. And that goes back to, I think those are things we struggle with throughout life, because we are weak, because we are fallible.
Well, and maybe the word is fragile too.
Fragile. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, there's a bunch of other words in there, but no, fragile is a good one. We
in the
really
sense
are.
like there is, I mean, just in the very nature of our flesh too, our bodies,
Yeah.
we're way more fragile than we really think we are, right?
Mhm. Well, look, if anyone thinks they're not fragile, just skip a couple meals, don't get enough sleep, and then let's see how your affect is and demeanor within 72 hours. Like, I'll destroy that. Like, let's do a little experiment.
Yeah.
Let's see how strong you really are. You know. Yeah,
Now
I got you.
we're getting
I'll hold you.
we're getting back into Lent. Because that just reminded. So I don't know if you noticed, but I have no alcohol today. Because I'm just when you mentioned that, of course, it's my Lent, it's not your Lent. But when you mentioned that Lent is a time of abstaining from meat, the pleasures, right? Meat, wine, and what was the other thing?
The goodies.
The goodies.
Well, yeah,
Meat, wine, and
we basically become vegans for a while.
yeah. Well, I thought, well, what am I? Do I believe in Lent or not? And I don't want it to become some kind of magical. Some of the things that Jim was saying, I think is true. Some people take it to be a superstitious thing,
Yeah.
right? Like if I do this, I'll be. No, it's recognizing my fragility, and I think
it's enhancing your fragility, right? Like,
yeah,
and again, like from a Godward perspective, that, I mean, you really got two choices. I think, it's the parable of, well, it's not really a parable. Jesus doesn't say it's a parable. He tells a story about the publican and the Pharisee. One went up to pray and was like, I'm not as bad as the other ones. Hear my prayer.
Yeah.
And the other one said, have mercy on me, a sinner. That's coming to God in vulnerability. That's coming to God with a felt sense of need. It's more than just in our heads. It's like, I know that I am, even as a creature. That's the thing. Like, when we fast, when we give up certain things, it accentuates the fact that we're conditioned, or we're conditional, right? Like, we're only here because God so ordains it and holds us and gives us life. We're not self-sufficient. We constantly are in need. We're in constant need. If like looking at the miracle of birth didn't like clue us in that we humans are really weird, the fact that we are utterly useless for nearly the first 2 years of our lives, and had it not been for other people's love for us in some tangible way, we would have died.
Yeah.
So that's how our lives start. This is how it starts, and it continues in lots of ways that way. Like, we are in absolute need, but we don't live that way. Like, that does not, like, if I say that to some people, they're like, I don't need anybody. I don't need, it's like, okay, whatever, bro. I can come up with another experiment and we can test that theory. But on a spiritual level, like, we come with empty hands.
Yeah.
We don't bring anything. The only thing we bring is need. Have mercy on me. Help me. Save me.
Yeah. Man, and how hard is that for me?
And it's hard for people
to grasp, for humans, but
it's hard to do.
I don't know. Man, I mean,
it's
because
like, if I show up empty-handed,
what am I?
Am I going to be rejected?
Well, that's true too.
I mean, there's that fear,
worried
right?
about being rejected. I guess when I think of showing up empty-handed, if I have nothing, then what am I? Am I just the sap?
Am I just? But that's you're just a sap, right? If I come empty-handed, and it's not to say there isn't things that we
Yeah.
um, can.
Well, see, that's
We can give God our childlike tokens of affection, but at the end of the day, they're like my kids going, "Look, Papa, look what I made you," and I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome! It's the worst piece of art ever."
oh, come on.
You know what I mean? Like, wait, sure they're not watching. This is what I mean. Like it's a token, right? It's a token of their affection and their love. It's not a masterpiece by any stretch of imagination. Yes, it can live on the refrigerator. Yes, I secretly keep them, tucked away because these are precious to me. Um, but yeah, if we're looking for some sense of glory from a Godward perspective, they're sort of ridiculous in a way.
Huh.
um, and yet lovable.
Well, yeah, well, and all it's all relative, right? I mean,
well,
somebody can fling blue and red together, and people call that beautiful art.
art.
I think it's all there. There is a relative nature of as to like the widow's mite, right? Like the widow's mite. It wasn't that it was
Yeah, it's because she gave all that she had.
right. And
it's but see, that's the thing. It's relative in yeah. What's not? I guess one way to maybe express what I'm trying to say is what's not relative is the meaning.
No, I'm not saying the meaning is relative.
Yeah,
but I'm saying that the relative value, right?
Sure.
Value,
yeah,
is so relative.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I guess that's what I worry about, and so it helps for me to think that, because if I say I come to God with nothing, then I start. Well, then it's like, well, where does my value come from?
God.
Yeah, but I mean, do I have anything valuable? If I don't have anything valuable to offer God, if I'm just a sap to God,
you're God sap. Yeah, I think what we absolutely come with is an absolute need. It's an absolute vulnerability. Because there was a time when I was not. And if he wanted to, there could be a time when I'm not again.
It's true.
No problem. But he chooses not to.
But it's not a is it an arbitrary choice?
Well, yeah, it's arbitrary in the sense that it's free.
But is it random?
No, because it's not a. It's not a. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure if that category works. Because it's an active choice.
Based on what, though?
Based on love. It's utterly unconditioned.
I get that.
And I don't think it's right. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, because that's the thing. Like, there's nothing. I can't. Yeah, it's free.
In other words, yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I can conceptualize it when I think about my kids. There is something there that doesn't. There's nothing. What they bring doesn't affect my love, right? Like, I don't love them more if they bring more value to my life or something like that, right? If they're more valuable to me. It can't be random because it's
yeah, I think the difficult thing is from a divine perspective, like those fall apart. because there are people that do randomly love their children, and there are plenty of people that don't love their children at all.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so I mean, like what I'm throwing out there
But
is that,
I guess from my perspective, though, I
sure,
don't
no,
know what
yeah,
other
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah,
feel.
yeah. I mean, like even like
I
making
can understand
that
it based
analogy
on
between
what I
your
feel.
experience. Yeah, it can make sense of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gets where I go back to almost where we started off. Like that type of love, that type of freedom, that type of active choice, frankly, from our perspective, is so radically alien to almost be considered irrational. Like, yeah, but
Mm.
I don't, I'm a sap. Like, why? What? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why things would be the way they are? Um, why God would offer these outlandish promises um, to people like me? I don't. It does not compute. Does not compute. But so then the struggle becomes accepting it. If when we get away from trying to bring God something, then we're left with other unique struggle, which is accepting love in the face of who we are. Um, that I don't have anything. Oh, um,
Mm.
to open ourselves up to that type of compassion, um, and that also involves being open about our own vulnerabilities, our own again, like our own self woundedness, like.
Well, and that's why I think that's why church is so important, right? Like that's why the gathering of humans, sharing that these difficulties, but also being able to experience this perichordic dance between God, me, and another human.
All the humans around you, right?
Yeah,
Maybe, but they're without getting abstract. Yeah, I mean the human, the people, the persons that we're in that dance with are the ones that are immediately around us.
right.
Right?
We can feel something. We can make connection that is not as easy. Like, right? It's a
Or even experience disconnection,
right. Yeah.
and to call it as such.
Yeah.
Um,
And make sense of relationship that is originally meant for God.
I think
Oh,
I have to go back to the perichoretic dance. That it's meant for God and everyone else,
yeah.
because we all ultimately get wrapped up in that together.
Yeah.
It's not just me and God; it's me and God and everybody else,
Yeah. It's true.
or
Yeah.
me and the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit and everybody else and the angels. And make sure I'm not leaving anybody out here. Um, and the whole of creation. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that. I think that's everything.
And the
All,
aliens.
all in a dance together. Who knows? I don't
Kalel.
know. Yeah. Oh, wow. I don't know. Yeah. I don't.
I don't know.
I think C.S. Lewis has some good stuff on that, if I remember correctly. About
Oh, the like Power Lantra? You talking about the Power Lantra?
well, I think even in Mere Christianity and maybe God, or maybe God in the Dock. Um,
Oh, God in the
he
dark.
he he touches briefly on extraterrestrial life and takes a rather agnostic view. Um,
Really? Yeah.
yeah, but well, I mean, logically, I don't think you can rule it out.
Well, no.
Um,
Although I have heard people make biblical arguments against it.
it would be I guess, in my perspective, it would be at best a synthetic argument. Like you'd have to pull inferences from different parts of Scripture in an attempt to build it.
There's nothing overtly.
Yeah, you know, Second Hezekiah, 3:16. There are no extraterrestrials. Quit looking. Like if it was that clear, then I'd be like, yeah, there's no extraterrestrials. But I don't know.
Well, we did. Wow, we got 2 likes. One from Ray Rivera. What's going on, brother? And Scott was in the. Maybe he's watching now. I don't know. Say hello if you are, Scott. We will be back at it, Scott and I, on Monday, talking about kitsch art.
Kitsch art.
Kitsch art. Kitsch comes from the German word for trash.
Trash art.
Trash art.
You're going to talk about trash art?
Talking about trash.
Yeah. Huh.
As art.
Huh.
There's a movement out that sort of glorifies the trashy art. Well, that sounds wrong. I just trashy art, but like that glorify or that revels in
art made out of trash.
Well, no, just maybe the. I'm trying to figure it out with Scott. Tune in to see me struggle with it.
We'll have to tune in just so we can learn what this means, because I don't.
I think it's like being able to express yourself without being particularly
skilled,
intentional and skilled. Yeah. And I think Scott has some strong feelings against kitsch. Kitchen. Kitchen comes from the word trash. The trash place.
I didn't know that.
No, I
stop that. This is how bad this is how
it
bad things start.
It might.
Go get one of those books that talk about like where the words come from, and then I keep a couple of those around the house.
I have around this house. We have many of them. My dad has volumes, literal volumes of dictionaries. Like I always thought of a dictionary as one book.
One volume. I've got a 3-volume.
Wow.
I at one time, Latasha and I went to an estate sale, and this family was selling off. I think at that point, that was his children, their father's belongings, and he was a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And this man had, as a bibliophile, this is the only person. No, I take that back. Not the only person. This is one of a very select few people that I've ever walked into their library and thought, wow, I wish, like this guy, this guy was fascinating. Like he had done some post-grad work in Mexico, so he spoke Spanish, but there were books on psychology and philosophy and literature. But he's the kind of guy that thought, you know what I need? I need the whole Oxford English Dictionary, like all 21 volumes or however many it was. He's got an OED, like not the abridged version. I'm talking hardback, like
the whole shelf.
Takes up the whole shelf.
I'm like, I fear for my kids' lives because they have we put the computer under it, and the shelf.
one of them's
going to
they're gonna come in and just kill a kid.
Stop joking, kids! You will get an avalanche of words.
Yeah. Were it not for the fact that we were able to sell that for a reasonable, like for what we paid for all the books that we bought to resell, like the OED itself, like came close to paying for what we paid for all those books. Because this is one of these things where you walk in and it's kind of like they just wanted to get rid of this stuff, and so you walk in a situation and go, if we come back and just take it all, throw us a number. And I still have a couple of his books floating around. But no, I wish I need to go look and see if any of his name was, I forget his name. I have a fedora. That was this old psychiatrist, and a couple of his books still in the house. But no, I mean, it was one of the first times I saw a library, like just kind of peering into somebody's intellectual life and wondering, like, I wonder what this guy was like, and thinking, I'd like to have a library like that when I die. So I'm working on it.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
Well, quick shout out to my brother has a podcast called
To Blaze, which I watched an episode before we got on this evening.
Nice. Really?
I love the intro. The intro. Who did that? Did he do that?
No.
Did you do that?
Yeah.
You did? I wondered if you did. To Blaze. That is
actually no.
What do you have?
We did it. Me and Paul.
Because that little clip. To Blaze, like, what do you have that's worth living? What do you have that's worth living for? It's a great intro. Your brother's brilliant.
Yeah. It was mainly my brother's idea. He had somebody on this week, Dr. Luke Johnson.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. Yeah, who talked about it reminded me of like when I talked about magic, like when I think of magic, mining books and for old knowledge. And so what he said is he has been mining the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is someone who like reads Dante's Inferno, but he is mining Encyclopedia Britannica. It was just kind of mind-blowing to me. I was thinking, wow, interesting. He like goes through and he finds these stories and these interesting. I don't know. What made me want to. His thing is called the Noetic series, so you can find out more if you look up the Noetic series. I have to go. Oh, wait, we have somebody in the chat. Michael Cedrus says, yes, finally a live stream on YouTube. What's up, Mike? Yes, another live stream on YouTube. Oh, he's got to be being sarcastic. Because there's so many live streams on the old
many people, doing what we're doing right now all across the world.
And Michael loves it. He watches a lot of he likes we often talk about the Joe Rogan experience and different live streams. Anyways,
time to go.
I have to go. I'm over my limit. My wife is dinging me. Did you hear that?
Yeah, she's summoned you.
It's just like, are you done yet?
The queen has summoned you. Well, you go. You go take care of your marital responsibilities.
He's minding this podcast for now.
Oh no, I don't know if we want to do that. It's barely a show. It's barely a connection.
I don't know. I've enjoyed it. I'm glad you joined, Michael. I'm glad that let's see, that Ray and Scott were able to tune in. I enjoyed it as usual, brother, and I'll see you next week at our later time.
At our new later time.
Our new
8:30 and some change or something.
30 and some change, yes.
Or if since we're already here,
I think 30 and some change is good because the later we get, the more I get dinged. You know?
Well, yeah, I was about to say, or if we get too many dings, we just shift to a different evening, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. That's the name of my next podcast. I called it Too Many Dings.
Too Many Dings.
All right, brother. Well, creek was it? If the
I'll see you next week if the Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.